Okay. So thank you to everyone at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center for helping make Sundays with Survivors and 2G Tuesdays the successes that they are. Thank you as well to everyone here for being a part of this live virtual event and for those watching this recording. And a very special thank you to Steve Israeler for your willingness to share your testimony with us today. Welcome to Sundays with Survivors. My name is Michael Mantell. I'm a psychotherapist, an educator, and a 3G, a grandchild of Holocaust survivors. In 2020, during the COVID pandemic lockdown, I reached out to the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center about doing a one-time private event for family and friends. The event was so successful that we added another and another and opened it up to the public that have been going strong for over 2 years. In 2021, following the success of Sundays with Survivors, we added the new program called 2G Tuesdays, which provides children of Holocaust survivors the opportunity to share their parents' and families' testimonies with all of us. Sadly, since our last time meeting, we lost 2 survivors who shared their testimonies with us on Sundays with Survivors, Werner Reich and Ruth Mermelstein. Their passing and the passing of other survivors is a reminder of how important these events are. And I'm so grateful that you are all here to bear witness to Steve Israeler's testimony. Steve Israeler was born in Krakow, Poland in 1931. He was 8 years old when the war started. Steve shares his testimony of his family's forced move from Krakow to Tarnov, surviving the ghetto and numerous concentration camps against all odds, and making his way to Canada as an orphan after the war. At the end of this program, I invite you all to ask questions and share your thoughts during the Q&A portion. Please use the raise hand emoji if you know how to, or you can unmute yourself if I don't see your virtual or actual hand raised. You may also write your questions or comments in the chat, and I can share them for you. Just 2 quick announcements. I know many people made donations when they signed up for this program, and I'd like to say thank you to all of you on behalf of the Holocaust Memorial Tolerance Center. Your generosity helps them educate students across Long Island. If you'd still like to support their work, I'll be putting a link in the chat for you to make a donation. Also, please save the date for the next Sundays with Survivors event, which will be held for the first time in person at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County in Glen Cove, New York on Sunday, December 11th. During this free event, Rosette Prever-Gerbosi will share her testimony with us. The museum and the Children's Memorial Garden will also be open to all attendees and brunch will be served. I hope to see all of you or as many who can be there as possible. And please feel free to share this with family and friends to join us as well. As a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, I am thankful for all of the survivors who share their testimonies with us and to organizations like the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center for making events like these possible. And it wouldn't be without your help, support, and your presence being here as well. If you'd like to learn more about the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, would like to donate, volunteer, visit the center's museum, or inquire about their education and community outreach programs, please visit their website at hmtcli.org. That's another link I'll be putting in the chat. Thank you. And with all of that, I'd like to welcome Steve Israeler. Steve, I'm just going to have to unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. Just give me 1 second. Steve, are you able to unmute yourself?
We are unmuting. Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you. Perfect.
Are we on? Okay, my name is Steve Israeler. This is my American name. My Polish Hebrew name is Sacher Israeler. I am the sole survivor of a family of 8. My parents and 6 siblings. 2 of my siblings were shot with my parents in Tarnov. My father was shot. Well, let's start from the beginning. I was born in Krakow, as Michael said, January 19, 1931. That makes me 91 plus years old. Time flies, so we don't have much time left. Up to the war, I had a wonderful life in Krakow, to the point where I knew the city. When I came back with Susan, back 20 years ago, where I didn't have to ask a person where and to go from a place where no Jew would live to the place where I was born. Because I knew the city so well, I know Krakow better than I know New York. There's not much to be said. Krakow is much smaller. New York is different. We lived in Krakow. I was born into a, if I would say, upper middle class Orthodox Jewish family. My father was a very strict upbringer. Anything went wrong, we got slapped, at least the boys. We were 4 girls and 2 boys. These were the family and our parents. The Germans marched in on September the 7th, 1939. From then on in, my life and all the Jewish people's lives changed, and probably others as well. We were, from the beginning, the beards had to come off. The Jews that were with beards caught by the Germans, they had their beards burned or cut. Anything they could have fun with, that's what they did. If they tell you it was only the Gestapo, not true. Wehrmacht was as guilty of it as anybody else. They behaved just as badly as the rest of them. I believe it was in November or December of 1939, my father found out that Krakow should be made Judenrein, which means Jew-free. My father, not wanting to find or fight, packed us all up, and we moved to Tarnov, which is about 60 kilometers from Krakow. Am I right? And because an aunt of ours, of mine, lived in Tarnov, married in Tarnov, and well-to-do with 2 stores in their business life, one on Krakowska and one on Lvovska. They were quite well off. They found us a beautiful apartment in the new section of Tarnov. We moved there with all our belongings, and practically all our belongings, so that children were not affected as badly as all of that. The house was so good that the battalion commander of the Germans, which were stationed right across the street from us, moved into our building, requisitioned 2 or 3 rooms from people underneath us. He was yet, in comparison to all the other Germans, a gentleman. When he had a parade, the Germans marched in front of him. He invited my father to step up to the balcony and watch the parade. Everything was fun till about mid-June of 1940, where Hitler Jugend House was opened right across. And what is it called? Deutsche Jung, whatever, German Girls House next to them. And every time we youngsters came up, we were beaten, kicked, and laughed at. We couldn't walk the streets alone because they were just awful, just awful. My brother and I, who was 3 years older, found employment in a garage that belonged to the Gestapo. Being a youngster, I sort of finagled my way in to the point where they were my buddies, to a point where after the German occupation of Lvov and the eastern part of Poland, some of them went there. I told them I had a cousin and an uncle there. They found them for me and brought their information that they're alive. We lived there till about end of 1940, where the German civilians that came in and the German military wanted our apartment very badly. So my father at first finagled around. He painted little dots on the walls, showing that we had bed bugs. When the Germans heard bed bugs or typhoid or something, they run like hell. They had great fear of getting sick. So for a while, we could cheat them out of the apartment, but eventually we had to move out to an apartment that belonged to union workers, railroad union workers in Poland. There were block houses like you see here, these big blocks, not very well put together, not very nice, but were livable. Our apartment was on what the Poles would call parterre, main floor, but this is the first floor here. We lived there till 1942, June 25th. Of course, situation was terrible. It was getting worse and worse to worse. Every once in a while, a man, a woman, a child would be killed by the Germans. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes not so, but always people were shot at and killed. When the war started with the Russians in June of 1942, a week or two later, we had the first, what the Germans and the Jews called the action. They came in to each apartment, and this was mostly a Jewish section, checked on the people and checked on their what we call these identity cards. They were stamped. We didn't know what the stamps meant, but they knew. And those that had a certain circle around the stamp, they pulled out to the street and shot them as they would be bugs. In our block, probably 200 or 250 people were shot right in front of their houses. My mother, father, and two siblings, two girls, were taken out and shot. My father, a bullet came through his head, and he came back, half of his head shot off, came back to the house after the shooting subsided, and wrote, he couldn't speak, his mouth was torn up. He wrote, "Never forgive, never forget." That was his note to us. My two sisters and my brother and I survived the first horror of the action. The action lasted 7 days. They apparently killed in those 10 days about 10,000 Jews in Tarnov. Tarnov was full of blood, full of dead people. Streets, sidewalks, wherever you went, you saw dead people. It was horrible. But those of us that survived went on living. Our parents, my father died the next day, by the way. He was bleeding to death. No doctor, no nurse would come and help. In retrospect, when I look at it now, I can't blame him. Nobody wanted to risk or give his life for another. Nobody came, nobody helped. My father passed away the next day after he was shot. My two sisters and I went on living as long as we could. And we lived in the apartment where we lived with our parents. Then on, they started forming ghettos. One of my sisters, who looked Aryan enough, got false papers and went over on the other side. We didn't know, I didn't know if she was alive. My brother didn't know if she was alive. Whether my sister that was with us was in communication with her, I don't know to this day whether she knew if she's alive or not. We did, my brother and I. We lived in the ghetto for a bit of time. The Germans, they were good at psychologically destroying the people. They came in and encircled the ghetto with the Polish police, the Ukrainian police, and the Gestapo SS came in. It was the second action. It was at the end of 1942. They took a lot of the people living in the ghetto out, so that we were left by about 2,000 or 3,000 Jews by that time, 4,000 Jews in the ghetto. I don't know the number because I was a youngster and I was not interested in numbers. I was interested in people and how to survive. But then in 1943, they had the third action. The third action was everybody had to leave at the section where they worked. I was assigned at the time to work in a woodworking factory. My brother and my sister that lived together with me in the ghetto were taken away. I didn't know till the end of the action. I was picked by the driver of the commander of Płaszów by the name of Get. Those that saw the picture of Steven Spielberg's know who Get was. He was the worst killer this earth ever carried. I was picked by his driver because I tried to hide myself to make myself taller, that I'm older. He picked me up. He says, "You go to the other side." But I guess my idea was not to die. I came up to Get, was about 6'4", and I was about 4'4". And I said in German that I'm a good worker and I could work. He said, "Okay, go back to the side." I guess I was saved temporarily to live. Basically, this was the last serious action in ghetto Tarnov. There were left about 500 Jews who were left to clean the ghetto after the inhabitants. Furniture, personal things were shipped to Germany. The Germans got better for it. They got the Jewish furniture, Jewish pillows and pillowcases and whatever was left. It was all shipped by train to Germany. And we were left, finally we were cut to 150 people. Fortunately for me, unfortunately for the driver of a horse that drove the commander of the ghetto by the name of Blache, he ran away, got caught by a Polish policeman and shot immediately. The German commander came and asked if any of us could drive a horse with a horse buggy. I raised my hand and I said I could. He says, "How do you know how to drive a horse?" I said, "My father was a horse driver as well with a buggy in Krakow, and I know about horses. I drove one myself." He hired me. I became his driver for the months that the ghetto was still a ghetto with 150 people. It was not a pleasant job. I was on the call for 24 hours, 7 days a week. I was parked in front of his house. He lived across the Gestapo. the Gestapo headquarters. They used to bring in people, Jews and non-Jews, killing them right there. I had to come back at night with it was a baker's wagon and pick up the dead bodies, take them out to the cemeteries. There were Polish people burying them. I had to drive the Gestapo around whenever they wanted to. If I liked it or not, I had to drive. I used to be parked 18 hours a day, 20 hours a day, right of my boss's house. And to the point where a Polish kid called 2 German military policemen that here was a Jew, although I wore nothing to identify me as a Jew except maybe my face. They came over, they asked me if I am a Jew. I said, yes. What am I doing here? I said, I'm driving a ranked officer of the Gestapo SS. And if I have identity card, I show my identity. They saluted me, kicked the little boy that showed, they called them over to inspect me or to arrest me. And I was left alone. For this, the job, it lasted as long as the ghetto and the commander of the ghetto lasted. At the end, the 150 Jews that were left in Tarnov were put on trucks and shipped to a camp near Krakow, Płaszów, where the commander that saved my life was the guy. I came there, it was terrible. A lot of children, nothing to eat, lice by the thousands. And I said to myself, I cannot last here, I will die with the children. Because I knew if there are children, they will make action and they will arrest all the kids and ship them to whatever camp or kill them right off on the spot. So I volunteered to go to unknown place. They put us into a section of the camp in Płaszów. They kept us there for about 4 or 5 days and shipped a group of us to a town called Bielec. It was outside of the town. It was a factory, all Polish plane factory that they never used, but the Germans made good use of it and started building Heinkel 111K, the night bombers. And we had to build them. Eventually, I became, with the pilots, a tester of the wheels coming out or not coming out. These were not like today. They were automatically, the wheels went up. These were all made by hand, so I had to test them. Since I was small, I could sit between the pilots and test the wheels, test the wing flaps, and so on. It lasted as long as the Russians were coming close to Bielec. We heard the cannons shooting. Oh, by the way, we got tattooed. I'm tattooed with a KL on my arm so that we couldn't run and not being spotted. If anybody can see my tattoo on my arm, I have it blocked by my watch so people can't see it and don't ask me questions. To some people, when I was younger, I used to say this is my tattoo of a girlfriend of mine, Catherine Lambert, so they wouldn't know what it meant, because I was not willing to share my story of my life with them. From Bielec, we worked there for about close to 9 months or a year. Again, the Russians were coming close. The Germans found trains for us, freight trains. They put us up on the train. The German civilians of people that worked in the factory wanted to be put on the same train to be evacuated. The guards would not let them. It was only for the prisoners. We were shipped to a town called Wieliczka. This was a town near Krakow where they had an old salt mine. I don't think it was used anymore by the Poles before the war, but the Germans had an idea of building another plane factory underground. We started building it, but it didn't work so fast. The Russians again came up. So they put us up on the trains again, and we rode up, and we didn't know, but we asked a Polish railway worker, what does it say on the railway, on the freight cars? He says, you're going to death. This was our information. And they were shipping us to Auschwitz. But we came at the time where the people in Auschwitz that worked at the crematoria had an uprising and blew up the crematoria and some of the gas chambers. They didn't want to offload us, and we were shipped 2 or 3 days later, about a week's ride, to a camp called Flossenbürg in the Bavarian mountains in Germany. We arrived there, we were the first Jews. The camp were mostly Germans that were either political prisoners or guys that committed murders and robberies and such. They were the only prisoners there. We were the second of the Jews. There were no other nationalities except the Polish Jews that we were, and the German prisoners were there since 1933, some of them, 34. I don't know if the camp opened up. And life was, they put us up for about a week to an auxiliary camp behind barbed wire. And this was late fall of 43, I believe, or maybe 44. I don't remember years anymore. They kept us naked. There were about 2,500 Jewish men and boys like I, a couple of boys, kept us naked for about a week. Days we were outside, nights they put us into barracks to sleep on straw. We were up from 5 in the morning to 6 at night, outdoors in an auxiliary camp, practically no food. They brought us some soup that was total water, but at least it was warm. And finally, they let us out. We had to register. But my luck was the assessment that registered me. When he heard, they asked questions. The Germans were very thorough. They had to know your name, your mother's maiden name, how old you are, and so on. My mother's maiden name was Wolf. The guy jumps up. He says, what do you do here? You're not a Jew. So I didn't know what to say, because saying no is, I'm gonna get killed. Saying yes is no good. So I said, I don't know. He says, what do you mean you don't know? I am a wolf. Do I look German to you? I said, no, you don't look German to me. Boom. Anyway, he told me I'm gonna go to Jugendblock. That means youth block. So I heard that, I was scared. Knowing to be with young kids will not be very good for me. I tried to talk him out of it. I told him I'm 18. He told me I'm a liar, which was true. I was only 13 or 14 at the time. He says, you're going to youth block, which in truth was a youth block that had a little bit more food than the average prisoner. We were 1,000 kids, mostly non-Jews, from every corner of Europe, from every part of Europe, from Russian, Ukrainian, Poles, Italians, French, name it, they were there, Greeks, everything. Up to 18, they were in this youth block. We slept together in bunks, 3 ranks high. And every morning we went to work. Every night we came back. We had to stand on what they call Appellplatz, be counted umpteen times, because The counts were always wrong. They thought somebody ran away, somebody was not there. The counts were always right, but the people that counted didn't know how to count. So we had to stand outdoors till 10, 11 o'clock at night, in heat, in rain, in snow, in bitter cold. The alpine weather in Germany was not any better than the alpine weather in the French Alps. Very cold. We had very light clothing. It was not very pleasant to stand outdoors. We worked 6 days a week. On Sundays, they made us work, carry stones from one place to another. Every Sunday, we had to march out, just carry rocks. By the way, this was also, they opened a plane factory, or parts of the planes to be made in Flossenbürg. The camp, the name was Flossenbürg, I failed to mention. And we worked there. I worked in the plane factory, others worked in the stone factory, and stone, they were quarries and so on. But on Sundays, we had to go in, pick up stones, carry them to one spot. Next Sunday, we had them from that spot back to the other spot, just to make us sick and not be able to work and die. Every day in the outhouses, they brought bodies of the people that died during the night. One day none, one day 5, one day 10. We had to step over those poor souls to wash up and do our needs. It got to be awful. And from every day to day, we got less and less food because the Germans had less and less food. Even the German civilians had less food. So we were in deep trouble. In April 16th or 17th, we were all called together on the Appellplatz, and Jews had to step out. Again, I tried to hide among the other population. But a Polish kid from Krakow who knew me said, "Hey, you Jew bastard, step out, you're a Jew, you belong with the Jews." Gave me a kick in my rear end. I went back with the Jewish people. We were marched out about 6 kilometers to a train. They were mostly flat cars with 2 locomotives. They loaded us up, each of the flat cars with 4 Nazi guards. The train started moving. We didn't move 10 kilometers, where American planes came up, shut us up. The American fighter planes shut us up, killed some of us, wounded some of us, and shut up the locomotives. The Germans, in their wisdom, brought another 2 locomotives. It lasted like this for 4 days. We didn't move but about 10 kilometers. Because every time we had new locomotives, the plane somehow knew, and they just came in and bombed them out and shut us out. In a little town called Schwarzenfeld, the train did not move anymore. They didn't have more locomotives. They offloaded us, and they began to put us into columns of 100, 200 people. I was with the train of the younger ones, so we were luckier that we were a little bit stronger and a little bit healthier than others. And they began to march us off from the Schwarzenfeld. And as they marched us off, the planes came again. So the Germans decided they will march us at night, and we'll sleep in the woods, in the forests, or in the farm houses, not houses, but in their cow steads and where they had animals. We slept with them. We marched without food, practically no food, some boiled potatoes, some water. We marched like this for 7 days. In the small towns, some people, especially women, tried to throw food at us, but the guards shoot them off or shot in the air. They should disappear. The younger kids threw rocks at us, called us names, laughed. For them, it was fun. On April 23rd, 1945, at 10 a.m., we were in the forest. We looked up, there are no guards. We saw their bullets laying all around us, but no guards, no guns, nothing. They disappeared like they came from another world. They were gone. I grabbed 4 of my friends that we were close in camp with, and I said, we better disappear from here. They'll come back and shoot us dead right here. Let's move out. Well, where do we go? We started walking in. We saw a German major standing with a Panzerfaust. That's an anti-tank weapon. We asked his permission to go into town. In the meantime, we took him prisoner. We grabbed his gun. We took the guy and we marched him into town where we saw tanks and jeeps. At that time, we didn't know what jeeps, but they looked funny. Riding into town with white stars. We thought they were Russians. And we started shouting in Russians that we are Jews, that we are prisoners. But one jeep stopped and there was a Jewish guy. He was originally from Latvia or Lithuania, spoke Yiddish. And when he saw us, he started crying, we started crying. And he said, boys, try to go back before, because you never know if the front gets attacked, they may move back and you'll be captured again by the Germans. Just move back. And the American tanks threw food at us, left and right. I asked my boys not to eat the food because we get sick. We had no stomachs left for the food. The GIs ate. We went to a farm. I asked the woman if she's alone. She said, yes. I said, we'll take showers or baths, whatever you have. And do you have any clothes? She says, yes, my husband is not coming back. He was on the front and killed. We took his stuff and dressed up as best as we could. I was lightly wounded in one of the attacks on the train. And we started moving back. We packed up the food that the GIs threw at us in bags and clothes and threw it our bags. And we moved back from the front line that we couldn't get captured again. By the time I got about 2 kilometers, I couldn't walk. My leg was bad. There was an American ambulance. They picked me up and took me to a field hospital. But I laid there for a few days rather, excuse me. Next to me was an American Army lieutenant. And he told me in sign language that I'm not going back, that I'm going with him. And this was the case. He took me back to his outfit, which was the 90th Division, which liberated us. This was the 358 Regimental Combat Team. And I stayed with him as a free person, with 3 people. First time in 5 years. I was all alone. I took to drinking. I was 15 or 14 years old. I was drinking. I was drunk every night. Still, an army doctor came up. He said, if you want to commit suicide, there are easier ways of doing it. But if you keep on drinking, it'll kill you. So if you want to get killed, you can jump under a train, under a truck. You'll die quicker and easier. I listened to him. I stopped drinking. And I stayed with the American outfit till they were shipped home. I ended up going to a orphanage that UNRWA organized. UNRWA was a UN group of people that organized all kinds of things, and they organized an orphanage in a place near Dachau. If anybody heard of that camp, it was outside of Munich, in a place called Indersdorf. I stayed there because the troops wanted to take me on the ship in a duffel bag to go with them to the States. I said, I'm not going under false pretenses. I don't want to go that way. I'd rather live my life wherever my life gets me. I ended up in the orphanage. It was a mixed bag with people, Jewish kids, Polish, again, all the groups that the Germans collected were in that orphanage. We mostly got along. Mostly, there were some fights, some little things, some big things, but nothing bad. Anyhow, I found out that an aunt and cousin of mine were liberated and lived, about 80 kilometers from the town where I was in the orphanage. So I told the manager of the orphanage that I have family members in this town. I would like to visit, I'd like to see them. He gave me permission. I took a freight train and jeep rides, whatever. I walked. I finally got to the town where I met my aunt and cousin. My aunt was married to my father's brother and their daughter. The father died in Flossenbürg camp. Those two girls, the girl and mother, survived Auschwitz, among other places. And we, of course, greeted each other with tears and laughter and everything else. But I didn't want to stay with them. I went back to this orphanage. On the way, on the train back, there's a guy, the code word for Jew was Amchu, which means from the folk, from the land, from the group of the people. And a young man, a little older than I, comes over to me. He says, "Oh, are you Amchu?" In Polish. I said, "Yes." He says, "I'm looking for a boy by the name of Israeler." Oh, I said, "What do you want from him?" He said, "I was sent here by his cousin, who is the head of the Jewish group in a town called Constance. He wants to pick him up, and the whole group will go to France, and from France to the States." I said, "That's me." So I went back to the orphanage. I told the manager what happened. I grabbed my little bag, whatever I had, none. Whatever I had, a pair of underwear, maybe a pair of socks. I took it, and we went with him to a town called Constance. And from there, we went to France. That was our mistake, because we were no longer DPs. We were no longer the people that were in camps, but we were now foreigners in French land without language. And we were not allowed to come to the States. We were not anymore refugees that were slated to come back to the States. I had to wait for my visa, which was 20 years down the road, since they went by the citizenship of the birth of your, like I was Polish. So the visa was closed for 20 years. All of a sudden they decided, the Canadian government, in their wisdom, the most anti-Semitic government outside of this one, decided they would let 1,000 Jewish orphans into Canada. And the first 100, I was among them. we went through the same type of inspection as the Germans did on us. Any pimple on our bodies, if you couldn't count 2 + 2 or 4 × 4, we were rejected. Flat feet, rejected. So from the group of 20, there were only, from the group of 100, there were about 20 left. We formed a group and we went to Canada. We were shipped to Canada by sea. We went to Montreal, from Halifax to Montreal by flight, because it was Erev Yom Kippur, I think, or Erev Shishun, I don't remember. And in a way, we were supposed to be having adoptive parents, but the people were, it was like a zoo. We were exposed to people, but I did not want to join an adoptive parents. I had my parents, that was enough. One set of parents, I didn't want any adoptive parents. But I found out that I had a cousin in Toronto. They shipped me to Toronto to her house. And this was my beginning of my life in North America. I came to Canada in September 47. I stayed in Canada for 2 years. I went to a school, a boarding school outside of Toronto for 2 years. I learned English. I caught up with all the schooling that I missed in Poland from the age of 8 to 14, 15, the liberation. And in September of 1949, my visa came through. I got the visa and I immediately went to the States, to New York, where I lived with my aunt, cousins, and their husband. This is my life in a free country as of then. I am now 91 plus the last years of my life, whatever may be. I'll try to live them out as best as I can. But I want to warn people before I go, and that's the reason why I am talking to people, maybe not as well, because I'm nervous. I'm not used to being a talker in groups of people. I want to warn those people that may not think much about it, that history tends to repeat itself. And they killed us once, a civilized country became a killer country of our people. It can happen to any of us down the road with 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Remember that we have to be prepared for such life. And I believe strongly that if you have to fight under such circumstances, we should fight, not to listen to people that will tell you, oh, it's only a temporary thing, or you cannot do anything about it, or because the rabbi said, don't fight back, fight, fight, fight for your lives. No matter what you do, if you have to pick up arms and fight, do it. Don't let them kill you like they killed us. They killed 6 million of us. They killed my immediate family. Don't let them ever, ever do, whatever nation, whatever group of people pick up arms and try to kill you, kill them back. Shoot, fight for your lives. Don't let them destroy it. This is the story of my life. Thank you. And if anybody has any question, I'm available for the answers, if I have any.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was incredible. And thank you everyone who was with us this whole entire time. I just want to encourage everyone, either use your hand raise emoji or raise your hand or unmute yourself. This is, I mean, that was such an incredible part of this. This is going to make it even more meaningful. The folks on this call want to share either comments, any thoughts that came up, or any questions that they have. So I will first just share a few private messages, and I think a few people said Publicly, they said, thank you so much. I appreciate the Sundays with Survivors with Steve Israeler. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for sharing your remarkable story. There's so many thank yous, so many thank yous. And then someone said, you said that you were nervous, but you didn't come off that way. Your story is powerful, and thank you.
I'm not doing it for powerful. I'm doing it to convince people the things that happened to me, the things that happened to thousands and thousands of Jewish people can and will happen again. Remember, don't stand back, and don't stand for them to kill you and slap you and push you around. So now on in, never again.
Amen. Somebody asked, did you ever find out what happened to your siblings who survived the 19th?
Nobody survived. My sister and brother, the last two of them, they went into one of the camps, Majdanek or Sobibor. Or maybe they were killed someplace between Tarnov and other places. I don't know. They did not survive. The one sister that went on Aryan papers survived till a Jewish man who knew her from Krakow was working with the Gestapo. She was arrested a number of times, but they couldn't spot that she was Jewish. She had the Aryan papers with the church baptismals, whatever one needed. So they let her go. Finally, from the Jewish guy's mouth, she was arrested, never let go. She was killed right there. By the way, speaking of people, the Poles, when they are nice, they are super nice. They're nice. I had a nanny from the day of my birth to the day the Germans came in, where we had got rid of any people of Aryan descent who worked for us. We had to let go. She was sent away to a business friend of my father's. During the war, this woman, who I really think of as a second mother, for when I was scared as a little boy, nights were spent with her if I was frightened for any reason. Days when I came back from school, she was waiting for me. In Poland, schools were from 8 in the morning till 1:30 in the afternoon in my time. So she was waiting for me with a glass of milk and a piece of cake before I had dinner, which was lunch. I